My sister has never once helped me carry anything heavy. Not when I moved into my apartment at 22. Not when I spent 3 weekends hauling equipment into my building at 29. Not once. But the morning she showed up at my bakery, with my parents trailing behind her, she walked through that front door like she had every right to decide what happened inside it. Before I get into what she did, do me a favor, hit the like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I genuinely want to know how far this reaches. That morning is the one I keep coming back to, but to understand it, I need to take you back 4 days earlier, to a phone call I received just before midnight that changed everything. I had spent that Tuesday driving out to a supplier in Burlington to stock up on specialty flour and vanilla before the holiday season pushed prices up. By the time I got home and showered and sat down, it was nearly 11. I was exhausted. I set my phone on the nightstand, turned the lamp off, and had been lying there for maybe 20 minutes when the screen lit up. It was 11:47 p.m. The number was from out of province, a Quebec area code I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me pick up instead. "Is this the owner of the property on Locke Street?" a man's voice asked. He sounded polite in the way that people sound polite when they are trying to get something from you. "Who is this?" I said. He told me his name was Mr. Hargreave, and that he represented a private investment group that had issued a series of loans to a client over the past 7 months. I sat up. "I don't have any loans with a private investment group." "No," he said, "but your sister does." I felt the air go out of the room. He explained it slowly, like he had explained it before, and learned to give people time to absorb it. My sister Jillian had been involved with a network marketing company for nearly a year. Over those months, she had borrowed from his group to cover recruitment costs, training fees, and a series of losses after the downline she built collapsed. The total had grown to $68,000. "I still don't understand why you're calling me," I said. "Because," he answered, "she listed your Locke Street property as security against the loan." I stood up in the dark. "That's not possible. She has no ownership in that building. It belongs entirely to me." "That isn't what our paperwork shows, ma'am." "Then your paperwork is wrong." My voice was steadier than I felt. "My sister has never owned any part of my business or the property it sits on. Not legally, not informally. There is no agreement between us." There was a brief pause. "I'd encourage you to check with the land registry office in your area," he said. "Because according to what we were given, there is a co-ownership document on file." I stood there gripping my phone, staring at the wall. "You have 28 days, he continued, "before we begin the process of enforcing against the listed collateral." He said goodnight, and the line went quiet. I called Gillian immediately. It rang through to voicemail. I called again, same result. I sent her a text saying I needed her to call me right now, that someone had just told me something about my property and I needed an explanation tonight. No response came. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and went through every possible explanation, and none of them held up. Jillian knew the building was mine. Everyone in my family knew the story of how I bought it, because I had never let anyone forget it. I was 22 when I started working as a pastry cook at a hotel in downtown Hamilton. The pay wasn't impressive, but the hours were consistent and the overtime was available if you were willing to take it. I was always willing. I worked early morning shifts before the breakfast service and stayed late to help with banquet events. I picked up weekend catering gigs on my days off. I drove a car that needed work every other month because I refused to finance anything new when I had a different goal in mind. I opened a tax-free savings account and put money into it every single pay cycle without exception. I kept a notebook where I tracked every dollar I spent, not because I enjoyed it, but because I had to. Groceries, transit, the occasional dinner out. It all got written down. Every month I looked at the number and thought about what it meant in terms of how much further I still had to go. It took 6 years. By the time I was 28, I had saved $47,000. I had also spent those years learning everything I could about commercial leases, business structures, and what it actually cost to run a food business independently. I knew what I was walking into. The building on Locke Street had been sitting with a for sale sign for 5 months when I first noticed it. It was a narrow 2-story on a street full of small independent businesses, the kind of neighborhood where people actually walked in on a Saturday morning. The main floor had been a deli for years and still had most of the infrastructure I needed. I walked through it twice, had a structural inspection done, and made an offer. I went to my RBC branch alone and signed every document myself. My parents offered to co-sign the mortgage once, and I told them no. I was not interested in owing anyone anything. The responsibility was mine and I wanted it that way. The first year was hard in the way that anyone who has ever run a small business on their own will understand. The equipment needed upgrades I hadn't fully anticipated. The permit timeline pushed my opening back by 6 weeks. I had to learn invoicing, scheduling, supplier negotiations, and health inspections all at the same time I was trying to bake. There were nights I sat in that empty kitchen after midnight, wondering if I had made a mistake. But I kept going. I hired my first part-time employee, 14 months in. By year 3, I was booked out 6 weeks for custom orders. The mortgage got paid every month, sometimes with very little left over, but it always got paid. Every piece of equipment in that kitchen had been earned and paid off. The building was mine in every way that mattered, legally, financially, and in terms of the years I had given to it. The deed listed one owner. That owner was me. Jillian's name appeared nowhere on any document connected to that property. As far as I had known up until that phone call, it never would. The next morning I drove to my parents' house without calling ahead. I needed to see faces, not hear voices through a phone. My father Kenneth was in the driveway when I pulled up. He watched me park without saying anything. Inside, Jillian was already at the kitchen table. My mother Gloria was standing at the counter with her back half turned. My cousin Tamsin was there too, sitting quietly near the window, which struck me as strange since I hadn't told anyone I was coming. Nobody looked surprised to see me. I sat down across from Jillian. Did you use my building as collateral for a loan? She looked at her hands. Jillian. I kept my voice level. A man called me last night and said my property is listed as security against $68,000 in debt. I need you to explain that to me. She said nothing. My father pulled out a chair and sat down. We can work through this together as a family. I turned to him. How she used something that belongs to me, nobody asked me. My mother set down the cup she was holding. You have that building, she said quietly. You have more than enough. She's your sister and she needs help. I looked at her for a moment. She didn't ask me for help. She took something without asking. She made some mistakes. My mother's voice was careful, measured. But you're in a position to fix this. That's what family does. I shook my head. Nobody said anything to me. Not her, not either of you. Someone called me at midnight. Silence settled over the table. My father looked down. My mother folded her hands. Jillian still hadn't looked up. I asked again, more slowly. Did you sign something using my property? No one answered. No one denied it either. That silence told me what I needed to know. They weren't gathered at that table to help me understand what had happened. They had known before I arrived. They had been waiting to see whether I would accept it. I left without finishing the conversation. That afternoon, I drove to the land registry office and asked to see every document filed against my Lock Street property in the past 12 months. The clerk brought me a printout, and I sat down at one of the tables near the window and went through it page by page. Most of it was familiar. The original transfer of title, the mortgage record, updated insurance filings. Then I reached a page that made me stop. It was a declaration of co-ownership, filed 9 weeks earlier. According to the document, I had voluntarily transferred a 50% interest in the building to Jillian. I read it twice. Then I looked at the signature at the bottom. It had my name on it, written in ink that had been pressed harder than I usually press, with a forward lean I don't use, and a closing loop on the last letter that wasn't mine. I have signed my name on legal documents enough times to know exactly what my signature looks like. This wasn't it. Someone had studied it carefully enough to make it convincing at a distance, but up close, it was wrong in too many small ways. I had never signed anything giving Jillian any part of my property. I had never discussed it, never agreed to it, and never had any reason to. This document had been created without my knowledge, filed without my presence, and accepted into the official record. I photographed every page before I left. That evening I went to my parents' home office, where my father had kept important family documents since my grandfather passed away years ago. He had always been the one who organized paperwork, tax records, old insurance policies, copies of anything significant. At some point I had also left a box of older business files with them, while I was reorganizing my office above the bakery. The filing cabinet had several folders labeled with my name. I started going through them. The first thing that caught my attention was a business partnership agreement, with my name printed across the top. It listed Jillian as a 50% partner in my baking operation, backdated by nearly a year. I had never signed a partnership agreement with her, never discussed one, and never operated my business with any partner. The second document was a change to my commercial insurance policy. Someone had submitted a request to name Jillian as a co-beneficiary in the event of a property loss. I had not requested that change, and my insurance broker had never mentioned receiving it. Then I found something at the back of the drawer that I wasn't expecting. 2 notary stamp kits, still in their original packaging. Attached to one of them was a printed order confirmation from an online office supply company. The order had been placed 11 weeks earlier, shipped to my parents' address. I stood there holding those stamps for a long moment. This wasn't a desperate decision made overnight. This was something that had been assembled piece by piece over months. Someone had gathered my old documents, studied my signature, ordered supplies, created supporting paperwork, and filed the forged deed through the land registry system. They had done all of it while I was running my business 3 kilometers away, completely unaware. I took photographs of everything and placed the documents in a folder before I left. On my way home, I sat in my car outside the bakery for a while. The lights on Lock Street were coming on as it got dark. I could see the front window I had repainted the previous spring, the sign I had designed myself, the entrance I had repaired after a delivery truck clipped the doorframe 2 summers ago. Every detail of that building had a story attached to it. None of those stories involved Jillian. 2 evenings later, I was closing up when I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in the laneway at the back. A man and a woman I had never seen before were standing near my loading entrance, looking at the exterior wall. I opened the back door. "Can I help you?" The man spoke first. "We're here on behalf of an investment group. We've been asked to do a preliminary assessment of the commercial space." I kept my hand on the doorframe. "Assessment for what purpose?" "Valuation," he said, "as part of a security review." "This property is not available for any kind of review," I said. "You're on private property without permission, and I'm asking you to leave." The woman glanced at her phone. "We were told this had been arranged." "It has not been arranged." I held up my phone so they could see the screen. "I'm recording this conversation. If you're still standing here in 30 seconds, I'm calling the police." They exchanged a look. The man took a step back. "You might want to talk to your sister," he said flatly. "She told us that if the co-ownership document gets challenged, the equipment inside is the next option." He said it without any particular anger, just as a piece of information. Then they got back in their car and drove away. I stood in the laneway after they left, looking at the building I had spent 6 years saving for, and 5 more years building into something real. Ins were 2 commercial ovens I had paid off over 3 years, a proofing cabinet I had saved for separately, a stand mixer I had bought secondhand and rebuilt myself with a repair kit I tracked down online. Jillian had never stepped foot in my kitchen without being invited. She had never once offered to help, to invest, to be involved in any way. And now apparently she had offered my equipment to strangers as a backup plan. Any part of me that had still been hoping for a misunderstanding went quiet after that. The next morning, before I had even finished setting up the display case, 4 cars pulled into the parking spots out front. Jillian got out first, then my father Kenneth and my mother Gloria, then Tamsin, who still looked like she would rather be anywhere else. None of them had called ahead. They came through the front door together and stood on the customer side of the counter. Jillian looked directly at me. "You're really going to blow up this whole family over a building," she said. I set down the tray I was holding. "Jillian, I made a mistake," I panicked. "You have more than enough here and I thought—" "Stop," I looked at her steadily. "You forged my signature." Her jaw tightened. She looked at the counter instead of at me. My father cleared his throat. "Nobody wants this to go further than it has. If we handle it internally, everyone walks away without lasting damage." "Lasting damage to who?" I asked. "To Jillian? To the image of this family?" I looked from one face to another. "I haven't done anything wrong. I built this." My mother stepped forward. "We know you worked hard. Nobody is saying you didn't. But you can sign something new, something that makes the debt manageable, and this goes away quietly." I thought about the folders sitting on the shelf in my office upstairs, the photographed documents, the timestamps on the notary stamp order confirmation, the land registry filing with a signature that wasn't mine. I reached into my apron pocket and took out my phone. "What are you doing?" Jillian said. I dialed. The dispatcher at Hamilton Police answered on the second ring. I told them I needed to report a property fraud, that a document had been forged in my name and filed with the Land Registry Office, and that I had physical evidence to provide. I gave them my address and asked if an officer could come to me. Nobody in my bakery said a word while I was on the phone. When I ended the call, my mother looked at me like I had done something that could not be undone. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Yes," I said, "I did." 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I handed them the folder. I walked them through every document: the forged co-ownership declaration, the fake partnership agreement, the fraudulent insurance amendment, and the photographs of the notary stamp kits, with the order receipt still attached. I also showed them the video I had recorded of the 2 people who had come to my loading entrance the evening before. One officer paged through the folder carefully, while the other took notes. My mother tried once more. "This is a family matter," she said to the officer nearest to her. "We can resolve this ourselves." The officer glanced up. "Ma'am, filing a forged property document is a criminal offense under the Criminal Code of Canada. That's not something that gets resolved privately." The room went quiet in a way I won't forget. Jillian's face had gone completely still. My father was staring at the floor. My mother took a small step back. Tamsin had not said a single word since she walked in. The officers collected the evidence, took formal statements from me, and told me the investigation would begin immediately. They said the Land Registry Office would be contacted as part of the process. I watched the cruisers pull away from Lock Street, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt in days. Not happiness exactly, steadiness, like the ground under me was solid again. 8 months have passed since that morning. The land registry document was voided 5 weeks into the investigation, after forensic analysis confirmed that the notary stamps had never been properly commissioned, and that the signature on the co-ownership declaration did not match my verified signature on file. The document had no legal standing and had been obtained through fraud. Jillian was charged with fraud over $5,000 and forgery of a document under the criminal code. The case is still moving through the courts, but she is no longer able to pretend none of it happened. There are no more family conversations where everyone talks around the thing that was done. The investment group that had contacted me turned out to be operating an unlicensed lending scheme across 3 provinces. Mr. Hargreave and 2 associates were as part of a broader investigation involving 11 other victims. I was not the only person whose property had been put at risk to cover someone else's losses. Several of us gave statements, and hearing the others speak confirmed what I had already decided, that staying quiet would have helped no one and fixed nothing. My father Kenneth and I speak occasionally. The calls are short and careful, like we are both handling something breakable. I don't know if that will change. Trust doesn't rebuild itself just because enough time passes. It has to be earned back slowly, and we are still a long way from that. I haven't spoken to my mother since the day the officers came to my bakery. She made her choice that morning, and I made mine. The building on Lock Street is still mine, every square meter of it. This past spring I had a commercial-grade security system installed, with cameras at the front entrance, the loading door, and the laneway. I had new locks fitted on every exterior door. There is one keyring with keys to all of them, and it goes home with me every night. Some people who know what happened have told me I was too hard, that I could have found another way. I've thought about it enough by now to know what I believe. I worked for 10 years to be able to stand in that kitchen. I signed my name on every legitimate document connected to that building, because it was mine to sign. When someone else signed my name without my knowledge, they didn't just commit fraud. They tried to take the only thing I had built entirely on my own terms. The deed has one name on it. After everything that happened, it finally means exactly what it always should have.